Welcome to Next on the Tee with Chris Mascaro, the show where you get the inside access to the best minds in the game. Each week, Chris has the privilege of chatting with top instructors, legendary players, course architects, and industry insiders. If you're looking to improve your game, gain a new perspective, or just hear some incredible golf stories, you are indeed in the right place.
You see, Chris, let me tell you something. I haven't spoken to a press man in my life that is knowledgeable, seriously, as you are. Never.
You do such a great job. It kind of makes me feel good all of a sudden.
You do so much for the game. You're so kind to all of us that are out there in the game. You know, we need more people like you in the game of golf.
Thank you for pressing play. Now, grab your clubs, step up to the tee, and let's get started. This is Next on the Tee.
Hello, folks, and welcome into a special bonus episode of Next on the Tee. I'm your host, Chris Mascaro, and I've had the privilege of being able to sit down recently with Dr. Russell Levenson. Dr. Levenson has his doctorate in divinity from Beeson Divinity School. He has also spent 32 years in the ministry, 17 of those, as you'll hear about, at St. Martin's Episcopal Church in Houston. And among the people that he got to meet there were former President George H.W. Bush and the former First Lady Barbara Bush. You're going to hear an awful lot about his relationship with them and the book that he wrote about that relationship, Witness to Dignity, The Life and Faith of George H.W. and Barbara Bush. Book's out. Please go check that out. You'll hear some stories from that. Plus, he's got a wonderful new book coming out called In God's Grip, What Golf Can Teach Us About the Bible. It has a wonderful foreword written by Jim Nantz, who Dr. Levenson formed a wonderful relationship with. You're going to hear about that as well. Plus, he does a masterful job of taking verses from the Bible and the principles of the golf game that Ben Hogan taught over the years, and he marries those things together. It's just fantastic. So, look, Russ is a wonderful speaker. He is so entertaining, and he is just so genuine, and it just feels spiritual when you spend some time with him like we're going to do here in this next segment. So you know what? Sit back, relax, let us take your mind off everything else going on in your life for the next hour or so. Okay, before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our good friends over at the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. TribLive.com is the leading news website for Western Pennsylvania with news around the clock. Pittsburgh Pro sports coverage, a high school sports network, a podcast network, which you can find Next on the Tee on. So go out and bookmark TribLive.com or download the Trib Live app for free and stay up to date with all the news in Western Pennsylvania and this show. I also want to talk about our friends over at the Pittsburgh Brewing Company and Iron City Beer, a brand that I have loved my whole life and started drinking when I was 21 years old, of course. Whether you're a hacker or a scratcher, the secret to a successful day on the links is knowing when it's time to grab an iron, even if that means keeping it in the bag till the 19th hole. If it's been a while since you've reached for Pittsburgh staple beer, it's time to revisit Iron City. Thanks to their incredible new facility in Creighton, the best-tasting Iron City beer ever made is now available at a course near you. Iron City pairs well with any lie and sky and serves as a friendly reminder that there's always next round. Iron City beer, best enjoyed while enjoying life. And folks, this year, get ready to experience the game like you've never experienced it before at the Keep. It's the brand new Bill Bergen and Reese Jones co-designed course up at Macklemore. Nestled high atop Lookout Mountain, the Keep offers breathtaking vistas that are even more spectacular in person than they are in the pictures and the videos. With its challenging layout and awe-inspiring views, every round there is an unforgettable adventure. Whether you're taking on the signature holes or just soaking in the scenery, the Keep is where your best golf meets nature's finest backdrop. So grab your clubs and join us up at Macklemore this year. The Keep is open for preview play and it's waiting for you. But you gotta hurry now because spots and availability are filling up fast. So don't wait. Check out both courses, the Highlands and the Keep, for yourself online at themacklemore.com. And then do yourself and your buddies, or yourself and your family a solid by getting your spot reserved now. And experience distance and forgiveness all at once with the new QI35 driver from TaylorMade. QI35 is designed to give golfers more distance from more of the face while maintaining maximized forgiveness through high MOI designs. Whether you're looking for low spin and maximum workability, or easy launch and plenty of adjustability. It's available in low spin, core, and max models. QI35 also has a full assortment of fairway woods and rescues to deliver distance and forgiveness throughout the top end of your bag. Check them all out online at TaylorMadeGolf.com. Okay, now making his next on the tee debut with me is Dr. Russell Levenson. Let me give you some background on Russ. He is from Birmingham, Alabama, got his Bachelor of Arts degree from Birmingham Southern. He has a Master's in Divinity from Virginia Theology Seminary and his Doctor of Divinity from Beeson Divinity School. He also has an honorary Doctorate of Divinity from Nashotah Theology Seminary. He recently retired after 32 years in the ministry. He spent the last 17 of those as Director of St. Martin's Episcopal Church in Houston, the largest evangelical Episcopal congregation in North America. Over the years, he has received numerous accolades, including a couple appointments from Queen Elizabeth II. He's also the author of several devotional books, including Witness to Dignity, The Life and Faith of George H.W. and Barbara Bush, which takes an intimate look at their lives. Dr. Levenson had an amazingly close relationship with the former president and first lady that spanned almost 12 years. He also co-officiated over both of their funerals. The book received 4.7 stars so far out there on Amazon. And beyond his deep faith and remarkable career, Dr. Levenson is also a golfer and the author of a new book titled In God's Grip, What Golf Can Teach Us About the Bible, which is coming out very soon, the foreword of which was written by Jim Nantz. And I couldn't be more excited. I get to spend some time with him this week here on Next on the Tee. Hey, Russ, thanks for coming on the show.
Chris, it's great to be with you. Thank you. I didn't need that long introduction. That took up a lot of our time, but it's just good to call me Russ.
So, Russ, I want to get into the new book right away because there are so many great stories and lessons that you pack in there. And I want to start, first of all, by understanding where the inspiration came from to tie golf and the gospel together, because when I was doing the research on you, I learned that you don't play much golf anymore. You did in high school and college, and I believe your kids were actually making fun of you at one point because you don't play much golf anymore. So what inspired you to tie the two things together?
Sure. I played with my dad, played with friends all the way growing up. When my boys came along, both of whom are in their 30s now. My younger son, 30, actually plays a lot of golf now. And I played with them until, as you mentioned, St. Martin's is the largest Episcopal church in the country, and it had 10,000 members. Has over 10,000 members now, and I've retired. But once it kind of crested 8,000, I didn't have a lot of hours free to go out on the golf course. So now that I'm semi-retired, I'm looking at one of my practice golf clubs right next to me, and my intent is to get back out there and spend more time. You know, Chris, I did a lot of funerals over the years, and when I offered a homily or at a funeral, I tried to personalize it. It wasn't something I pulled out of the can. And one year, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I was doing a funeral for a golfer, and how much he loved golf. And so I started reading and trying to pull some images out, and I came across Ben Hogan's 5 Lessons and just pulled some quotes. But as I pulled the quotes, I thought, there's a lot of analogy to the gospel and the way in which we understand God. And I was really so I purchased the book, read the book. In fact, I keep a copy of it in my desk. And, those 5 lessons, the grip, the stance, the backswing, downswing, and review. To me, it was a wonderful correlation, a wonderful metaphor to how we live in relationship to God. And so I just started picking away. And one summer I thought, we were on vacation at the coast. I'm just going to hammer out a little book. And so I did. And this was around COVID, which tells you how old this is. But any author knows that during COVID, it was really hard to get permission. So about 6% of this book is actually Hogan's work. I pulled a lot of quotes and used a lot of his stuff, and took me about 2 years to track down. Of course, Mr. Hogan didn't have children, but he had heirs, and finally found them out in Texas and reached out to them through their attorney. And I said, I really need permission to borrow from this book. And they said, well, we want to see some of it. I said, well, you can see all of it. I finished. So I sent it to the family, and they were so sweet about it. Within a week, I heard back, and they said, absolutely. But all we ask is that you just please let folks know that the heirs of Ben Hogan gave you permission to use these quotes. So It's been a lot of fun, and even reading back through it, uh, I did kind of a small version of this, and then we expanded it with Morehouse, who's the publisher now out of New York, and they're very sweet, but they also said, not a lot of people know you in the golf world, so they know you in other worlds, but not the golf world. Do you know anybody in the golf world that might be willing to do a forward for you? And I actually knew Jim Nantz, whom of course I think the world of, through my friendship with President Barbara. He was very close friends with George and Barbara Bush. And I reached out to Jim and I said, would you mind doing a forward? And he quickly said, I'd be happy to do that. And then a really nice endorsement from Ben Crenshaw, which was unsolicited. He sent me a sweet note. Of course, he lives in Texas. And I pulled a note out of my mailbox one day. And it was from PGA great Ben Crenshaw, and he commended the book and thanked me for it. And so I went back to him. I said, would you mind doing a little endorsement? And he kindly wrote something up and sent it to me. So I'm really grateful for those folk who saw, the value of the book, but also the way at which it connects to this great sport.
So I have to ask you, kind of away from the book, and we'll get back to it in just a second, because I'm a huge Jack Nicklaus fan, and Jim Nantz was a rookie calling the Masters back in 1986, and he was stationed in the tower between the 15th and 16th greens. He was on the call with Tom Watson when Jack nearly holed out for a hole-in-one on 16. And after the tournament was over, Ken Venturi went over and picked him up in a golf cart and taken him back to the clubhouse. And Ken said to him, you might be lucky enough to call 40 or 50 Masters someday, but you'll never see another one like you saw today. Did you ever talk to Jim about being a rookie and seeing the 86 Masters?
I talked to him about a lot of things. So I've got, as you and I were discussing before we went on, I've got another book coming out in the fall, and Jim is one of those chapters. And so Jim is actually going to kind of lower the veil a little bit about his own faith journey. And part of that journey is the important role that Jack Nicklaus played in his life after Jim's father passed away from Alzheimer's after a long battle with Alzheimer's. And they were very close. And Jim was actually going through, the grief process that we all would if we lost our fathers who were close to us. I'm close to mine. And he said one day Jack came over and just put his hand on Jim's chest and said, Jim, your dad's right here. He's right here. And I think one of the things I love about Jim, of course, his tagline, and it belongs to him, it's hello, friends, is that he really makes everybody feel like, you're his friend. And here we come up to the 40th. I think this is his 40th that he'll anchor in a few weeks, comment on. And I think he looks at all these things. I mean, he'll say how many times he looked at himself and went through his life and went, how lucky am I? How blessed am I? How fortunate am I to do any of this that I've gotten to do? He's just such a great guy with a winsome spirit.
And Russ, I'm from Pittsburgh, and all season long here on the show, I've been highlighting my guests' previous experiences playing in major championships there at Oakmont. And in the foreword, Jim references a quote from Ben Hogan following his win there in the 1953 U.S. Open. Hogan said, you just can't do this sort of thing without God's help. And I read a couple of things into that. One, you can't achieve anything, especially of that magnitude, on your own, chiefly having the God-given talent. And two, things, kind of have to go your way that week. You have to get some fortunate breaks in order to win a major like that, which can be divine intervention, if you will. Yeah. But what does that quote mean to you?
Yeah. I think that quote actually probably pushed me out the door in writing the book. Because as you know, and I think everybody knows, Mr. Hogan was not a demonstrably religious man. I mean, this, a lot of people today, you'll know, and we know who they are, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But that was not, he's not somebody we would describe as out there as leading with his Christian faith or his belief system. But I think that said a lot. He had achieved a lot at that stage of his career, and he on that day, a particular day, he gives gratitude for the opportunity to play the game. He thanks his wife Valerie, and then, as you say, he says, "You just can't do this kind of thing without God's help." But I think that the wonderful thing about Ben Hogan's book is, for those who know it, and it's, of course, the late 1950s, early 60s book, but he says something I think every golfer needs to hear, which is, A, it's not that hard. He said it shouldn't be that hard. You know, they're like four things, including the review. They're four. Is your grip, it's your stance, it's your backswing, it's your downswing. If you can get those things and practice them on a regular basis, you know, he's not only will you become the golfer you want to be, you know, but then he goes on to say you'll actually enjoy the game, which is what you're supposed to do anyway. And that really speaks to me, Chris, about our faith. I mean, I'm a religionist. I've been an Episcopal priest. I've been in the church business a long time. And a lot of people in the church, I think, make following our Lord very difficult at times. I mean, I'm not against rules and morals and ethics. I think all those things are important. But at the end of the day, it's, you know, when Jesus was kind of pressed to the 18th hole and asked, what's the most important thing? And Jesus said, well, you know, it's love God and love your neighbor. And so I kind of use that as, again, as a metaphor as we go through the book by saying, you know, I don't think it's supposed to be as difficult as we've made it be. And I actually thought about this. Is not in the book. I thought about this. You remember a few years ago, the Masters was on Easter Sunday. You remember that?
I do.
Yeah. And so at the time in Houston, I lived close to my church. And we had a very early service, and I was close enough to walk. So I'm walking down the church, and I'm Episcopal, so I wear a clerical collar. And I come up next to this guy who's walking at the same time, and he looks at me and goes, are you a priest? Pardon me, want to go, well, yeah, it's not Halloween. I'm not dressed up for Halloween. But, you know, he's really nice. He was just kind of curious. And he said, well, where are you headed? Sunday morning again. I said, well, I'm headed to church, you know, and he said, well, you know, you're going to have a lot of competition today. But let's just get it. This conversation is not going well. You know, he's kind of winning. But, you know, I honestly, I've thought about that. And as I think about what golf does for so many people is provide a community of people. And, you know, the great thing I think about golf and the golf game is that everybody is welcome to play. We all play at different skill levels. And usually, particularly when you're watching a tournament, where here we come up on the Masters, watch the tournament. And when the ball goes off in the rough or it drops in the sand trap, you hear a collective sigh from the crowd. So all the crowd's with you. And then when you make the great shot, all the crowd's with you. And I really feel like the church could learn a little bit of something from the game of golf and the way it welcomes people, it suffers with people, it cheers people on. And at the end of the day, it's about a community that really enjoys spending time together.
So I want to take what you just said there, and I want to take it a step further because as you talked about with Hogan, you know, when he stopped trying to do everything perfectly,
right,
and focused instead on those four fundamentals, so focusing less, things started to click for him. And I kind of feel like that's something we should all do. We're all trying to do so much, and we're all trying to remember 42 swing thoughts when we're playing the game of golf, but it's also in life. But it feels like if we would just let go a little bit and just focus on the fundamentals, it would probably help us all lead happier lives.
Chris, you're exactly right. And of course, if you remember in that book, when Hogan talks about the grip, we'll just start with the grip. And he says, it all begins with the grip, you know. And he said, too many of us grip the club too tightly, you know, and it should really be thin. There should be a thin layer between your hands or your fingers and the club itself. And, you know, again, here we are in 2025. And I think a lot of us are trying to hold on very tightly just to get through the day. And we're trying to control a lot of our lives. We're trying to make sure everything turns out great, you know, at the end of the day, whenever our workday ends. And of course, I believe the gospel is not about us holding on to this life, but remembering who's holding on to us. And in the same way, I described this stance. You know, Hogan talks about how important it is to stand in a particular way. Again, a lot of us, you know, talk a lot about, particularly in the West, I suppose, standing on your own 2 feet, get a grip, you know, keep yourself together. But again, if we remember that we're standing in the grace of God at all times, then that kind of makes things a little easier. And then the backswing I talk about is just all the things that we do to build our faith, And so we're trying to build the strength of our faith as we are trying to build the strength of our backswing when we pull back. But things like prayer and worship and fasting, meditation, whatever it is, reading the Bible, whatever it is you use to strengthen your faith. And then we don't hold on to that. We let it go with the downswing and pushing our faith out in the world by loving service, by charitable giving, by caring for others, by, et cetera, et cetera. I actually did a talk on this over in Greenville, South Carolina earlier this week. And I said, and there will be a review. It's not up to us. There will be a review. But how important, I do talk about it as Hogan does, how important it is to, at the end of each game, kind of look back. And I think that's what those in my life and in the Christian faith are called to do, kind of at the end of each day. How did I do today? Did I live in letting God hold on to me? Did I live in his stance? Did I do things to give me a strong backswing? Am I pushing my faith out into the world?
So you talk about and interweave throughout the book, and you mentioned about having a bad grip, but there are a lot of things that Hogan referred to as swing records.
Yeah.
Several quotes in there about historical figures talking about what the swing records were and their lives. Where do so many of us end up losing that grip?
Yeah. Yeah, and I can speak from experience, I think, Chris. I mean, can't we all? Perhaps men more than women, I think. But, anytime that we kind of, let's keep the metaphor going. We kind of step off the fairway into the rough or into the sand trap, of life, then it does begin to kind of mess up our life. I mean, I spent a lot of my ministry sitting down with people who just went completely off the rails, and yet, one of the great things, again, I would say golf could teach the church a lot. The great thing about golf is you have a miserable game and you can go out tomorrow and have a great game. And I believe part of the job of the church is to say, you can walk in here with all your messes and broken places, and we're going to love on you. We're not going to turn you out. We're going to help you get back out there tomorrow. But yeah, I think people who have invested their entire lives in the material world, with forgetting that there's a world beyond this world, and there's a life beyond this life, it can be pretty empty. I have spent, as probably you have too, a lot of time around people who've had tremendous achievement in their lives and yet feel pretty empty. I've also spent time with people who've had tremendous achievement and feel pretty full because they haven't lost that thread of realizing all of that is stuff that you give back at the end of the day.
Russ, I want to segue a little bit and talk about your relationship with the Bush family. Mm-hmm. When did you first meet the former president and first lady?
The first time was as a college student. I met the president at an event held here in Birmingham, Alabama, actually. And then there was 30 years in between, or more than that. I was serving in a church in Pensacola, Florida, and was contacted by the church in Houston. In the Episcopal Church, you're not moved around. You enter call process. It's kind of like you move through a process of being contacted, interviewed, hired, and called. And if you accept the job, you can go. So ultimately, that was a long process. We could spend 2 hours talking about that. But I was ultimately called there. My wife, Laura, and I and our 3 children together came to this decision. It's what we were being called to do. And we knew that 41 and Barbara were members at St. Martin's, but we didn't know how active they were. We didn't know if they were people in my business call people priesters who come to Christmas and Easter, and that's it. So we didn't know if they were priesters or if they'd be there every week. And Chris, about a few weeks after I was called, I was at my house one day and the phone rang, and it was the president's office. And he called to say, and all my family was east of the Mississippi. Of course, Houston's west. And he said, hey, we're looking forward to seeing you. Barbara and I are looking forward to getting to know you and welcoming you to St. Martin's and, calling you friends, et cetera. And I thought that was really nice. And I thought, well, we'll see. I don't know. But about 2 weeks after that, he must have gotten wind that my parents were in Birmingham and my wife's parents were in Alabama. He personally wrote a 2-page letter, handwritten, to my parents and my wife's parents, saying, I know this must be hard for you. We just need you to know that we're looking forward to this new ministry. We're going to support them. We're going to befriend them. We're going to take care of them and look forward to meeting you. And Chris, they really did. I mean, they really did take care of us. And what we saw in the two of them, they became, I think, safe to say, fast friends. I mean, we traveled with them. We went to Kennebunkport with them over the summer. They would take us out to dinner and plays, and we'd go to sporting events and things like that. Go to their house. They live not far from the church. But they were just very kind, dignified people, and they were in church every week. If they, unless they were sick or unless they were traveling, and that, of course, meant a journey with them through the last years of their life until the time of their death. And I was with both of them when they died, and the family, and they had asked me to officiate and preach at all the services around them. And of course, that was a tremendous honor. But at the same time, I learned a lot from watching the way in which they lived these incredibly busy public lives, but were really caring, dignified people. And of course, the president loved the game of golf. So that was another thing.
Talk about their interest in heaven, and not in terms of if there is a heaven or
Right.
am I going to heaven,
Yeah.
but in terms of what it's like.
Yeah. So I will tell you, Chris, and all this is in that book you mentioned, Witness to Dignity. But and they were, and I will say, all the living children read that book. So I didn't put it out without their approval. So there's some pretty personal things in there. And but as the president began to decline, as Barbara began to decline, those conversations began. And I love the way in which they would ask the question. The president mainly, he would say, "What do you think heaven's like?" In fact, one day he was talking with his executive assistant, a woman named Jean Becker, who's written some great books about the president. And he asked Jean, he said, "Well, Jean, do you think there's a hell?" Jean, she said, "Well, I won't go into what Jean said." And she said, "I think you need to call Russ. I think this is a discussion you need to have." So he calls me, and I come over to the house. And in fact, she called me. She said, "I think you need to get over to the house. The president's talking about heaven and hell." But his question was not, is there a heaven, but what do you think it's like? And because I don't think I know he knew there was a heaven, and Barbara did as well. And they lost their daughter at a young age, Robin, to leukemia. And we talked about this more than once. He would say, "Will I see Robin again?" And I would say, "Absolutely." Well, Chris, none of us expected Barbara to die before the president. Barbara died in April of 2018. He died in the end of November. And of course, they had an incredible love affair. It was great to see them and be around them. And so after she passed away, and I was with her when she died. Her last word, by the way, was home, HOME, home. And but after she died, he asked me the same thing. He said, "I will see Barbara." "Yes, you will see Barbara." But he would then say, "Well, how old will they be?" I would say, "Miss Brown, that's beyond my pay grade. I don't know those kinds of questions. I just know that we will see each other." So, and they both had a great sense of humor. Just absolutely wonderful people.
The second half of the book, you call it the downswing. And I think some people have the wrong view of God as being a punisher, someone who's constantly looking at our failures, God being about rules and judgment. Talk about the God of abundance and living from the inside out instead of the outside in.
What a great question, Chris. It's funny. As I share with you, I'm working on another book right now, and just probably an hour before we finished, I'm closing out the book, and I'm saying a lot of us, probably all the world, knows John 3:16. I mean, it lives behind home base at many baseball games. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that all that believe in Him would not perish. And I said, but honestly, it's a great verse, but a lot of people have used that verse to beat up on people. And they forget the verse that right after that, for God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world would be saved through Him. God did not send Jesus to condemn the world, but He sent Jesus that the world might know and be saved by Him. So I do think God's first word to us is love. I think His last word to us is love. I think when Jesus said, "I came to give you life and give it abundantly," John 10:10, what he was saying was, this is, again, this is supposed to be a game, a journey that for the most part should be joyful. Of course, maybe another discussion someday we have is about a lot of the horrible things that are going on in our world today. But I think the faith itself is supposed to bring life and joy and peace, and the way in which we receive those. I do believe we're actually called to share those with the world. So that downswing is, of all the things we've received from God, we really need to look to others and give those. I often told people, in fact, in my last 2 sermons at St. Martin's last year before I retired, I said, remember Jesus' word on his last night, which was, others, this is how other people will know you are my disciples, if you love one another. This is how they'll know. Not if you know the Bible perfectly, not if you belong to this church, not if you're perfect, not if you're. This is how other people know you are my followers, if you love, if you're a loving person. And I have to remind myself of that every day, whether I'm in traffic or in the long line at the grocery or whatever it is. But I do think that really tells a lot. And in our world today, we certainly need that. And again, just to press the metaphor, boy, when the guy makes the great shot or the gal makes the great shot on the green, out of the fairway onto the green, into the cup, everybody around cheers them on. And I think one of the things that we could do as people, for those who call ourselves believers, is spend a lot more time cheering people on, encouraging people, being there for them, being their partner in life by loving them.
Boy, do I agree with that. And Russ, so many, when they talk about golf, so many of us amateurs and PGA professionals, we've all analyzed Hogan's swing, right? We're looking for the secret sauce, the key move. What
Right.
was it that made him so great? And he said, like you referenced earlier, it's simpler than you think.
Right.
And another quote in the book from him is, the average golfer's problem is not so much a lack of ability, it's a lack of knowing what we should do. And I feel like as Christians, we're often in that very same place, wondering what we should do.
Yeah, I love. There's a piece that, and I use it in the book where Hogan talks about, in a way, how sorry he is to look out on somebody who's just swinging away and making it so hard. But I'm kind of flipping over here to I actually pull my book out while we're talking, where he says, I've always thought of golf as this is Hogan, as the best of games, the most interesting, the most demanding, the most rewarding. And I cannot begin to express the gratification I've always felt in being part of a game with such a wonderful flavor and spirit. I found the game to be, in all factfulness, a universal language. Whenever I traveled home or abroad, I really enjoyed every minute I have spent in golf. And I'll tell you, Chris, I was an ordained pastor for 32, and you priest, and you don't really leave the ministry. I'm doing some teaching this weekend. I'm not doing that constant work. I will tell you, I loved every single day. I was ordained in June of 1992. I loved every single day. There were hard days. There were days I didn't want to go through, death of friends, death of loved ones, those kinds of things. But I loved it because I knew I was invested and experienced the enterprise of something that was far beyond my day-to-day existence. It was a little teeny piece of the big puzzle that we call the kingdom of God. And anybody can do it. You don't have to do that with a collar. You certainly don't have to do the collar. I used to tell my members, when I walk into the grocery with a collar on, people are expecting me to ask them to go to church, or they're expecting me to look in their buggy and see how many bottles of wine they bought or whatever. But when you're when you're the golfer, the banker, the bus man, the whatever, and you walk in and you're exhibiting the faith with your actions, with your kindness, with your words, that speaks volumes more than what the preacher says from the pulpit. And again, I think it's a life that should be lived joyfully. I think it really is what we're called to do. And you can do that on the golf course. If you don't wrestle with it too much. I think I might have told you before we got on the show at one point when we were talking, I said, I have heard Jesus' name a lot on the golf course, but it's usually not in prayer. But however, I think Jesus is out there with us. I think he's with us here. And I think he holds us in the palm of his hand.
Russ, as we come to the end of the book, as you call it, the last hole, you tell how Hogan describes living each day to the fullest, kind of what you were just alluding to a moment ago. And each day is another opportunity to share fellowship with others. And I think we should view our time on the course that way instead of getting so down on ourselves, because as you know, as you talk about invoking Jesus' name, a lot of times we get so down and so negative when we hit a bad shot or we have a bad hole or a bad round, when we should be enjoying the fact that we're in a beautiful setting. We're out there with our friends or our family, enjoying an opportunity to spend time together. Instead, we often get so uptight, and I think we miss out on everything that's good around us because we're so concerned about what our score is.
Right, exactly. That's a great way of putting it.
So tell me, as we kind of wind up the book, and like I say, so many great stories, so many great quotes. But if someone's going to walk away with one or two things after they read this book, what are you hoping they walk away with?
Yeah. So, and I again, thanks to Jim Nantz, thanks to Ben Crenshaw, and as we, the book comes out April 1st, right before the Masters. But I will say, I'll go back to that opening quote, that 1953 U.S. Open Championship, where he says, "You just can't do this kind of thing without God's help." I think it's okay when you wake up in the morning to call in God's help. I mean, who doesn't need it? And when we think we don't need it, we stumble, I think. And I think what Hogan said, as you know, Hogan loved to teach. He loved to show others how to show the way. So when somebody steps up behind, or have somebody like Ben Hogan step up behind you and say, "This is how to play. This is how to enjoy it. This is how you feel like you've finished the game well." I think that's what God offers us. This is how you play, and this is how you enjoy it, and this is how you finish the job. And I like to say, the book's title is "In God's Grip." I like to say, God's grip doesn't slip. If you put your hand in His, He's not going to let go of you.
So you said the book is going to be available starting on April 1st. Where can we go get our copy of it?
It of course is on Amazon, along with everything else. But it's on Books A Million and Target and Walmart and Barnes and Noble, all the websites and some of the stores. I think most of the stores throughout the Southeast will carry it, but it's available pre-order now on Amazon. But I will be watching the Masters and enjoying that, and I can't wait to finally get back out on the golf course. Let's talk in a year and see how well that went.
Deal. We will definitely do that. Russ, how also can we stay up to date with all the great things you're doing, whether it's on your website or it's on social media?
Yeah, I do. I'm honestly, I'm not a big social media guy, but I do have a website under my name. And actually, if folks want to, it's been several years now. Every now and then somebody come up and say, "Well, I remember when you did the president's funeral." But I will say, all those things are on there, on YouTube and out on the funerals are there, the homilies are there, so that's one way. I do have a new book coming out in the fall, which is already up on Amazon, but it's not out yet. It's called "Witness to Belief: Conversations on Faith and Meaning," and it's 12 conversations with people that live in the public eye. Jim Nantz is one of those. Gary Sinise, the actress Sam Waterston, Nikki Haley, Britt Hume, Jane Goodall, Denzel Washington, all these people very generous with their time. Just finishing up the book this weekend, off to the editor. It'll be out in the fall. And again, the attempt there is just to invite people into the lives of other people who know how to live this life.
Outstanding. Russ, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and share your stories and share with us everything about the book and giving us a little more hope and some things to think about on a happier note. To your point that you alluded to a moment ago, we got a lot going on in the world right now, a lot of negativity out there. I think one of the great things that we can do is to kind of lift each other up, and I think this book does a great job with that. You do a great job with that. So I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. And I hope we do get the privilege of having you back on the show. I mean, we don't need to wait a year. Let's get it done a little bit earlier than that. And we talk about the next book.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And God bless you. God bless your listeners.
I appreciate that very much. Take care, my friend. All the best to you and your family. We'll catch up soon.
Thank you. Take care.
That is the great Dr. Russell Levenson. How fantastic is that man? How interesting are his stories? How fascinating are the things that he has gotten to be a part of? And then he's written a few wonderful books about those experiences. Again, Witness to Dignity, The Life and Faith of George H.W. and Barbara Bush. And now soon to come out, beginning of April, In God's Grip, What Golf Can Teach Us About the Bible. But just a wonderful individual he is, and so engaging, and such a wonderful speaker, and he just draws you in to who he is and the kind of person that he is and the things that he is trying to teach and profess about. I mean, I just couldn't have been more enthralled with those stories. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it half as much as I did, then we've really had something special there in that bonus segment of the show. So excited about Russ. Hope that we get the privilege of having him back on the show again sometime later on this year. All right, my friends, it is time for me to put a bow on this very special segment of the show. I can't thank you enough for coming and being a part of it. I hope you'll tune in to next week's show. Got a dandy lined up for you with our good friend Steve Shingledecker, the men's golf coach at Robert Morris University. And what a wonderful thing they've got going on there at RMU. Go Bobby Moe. Check them out in the NCAA tournament. Following him, I'm excited to say I'm going to get a return visit from World Golf Hall of Famer David Graham, and then he'll be followed by one of our wonderful friends, a guy who's been on the show, and I'm excited to tell you this, 9 times we've had the privilege of sitting down with a guy who's got one of the all-time great swings and a 9-time winner between the PGA Tour and the Champions Tour. Tom Pertzer will be back with me. So, folks, a great show coming up next week for you. I hope you'll come back and be a part of it with us. I cannot thank each and every one of you enough for all you've done for the show, for making Next on the Tee the #1 golf podcast over on Good Pods. So go check it out there if you don't. And on top of that, we have the privilege of being there on the homepage of the sports section of the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. A greater honor I cannot imagine for having this show available to all my Yinzers back home in the city of Pittsburgh. So thank you to the wonderful folks at TribLive.com. But again, as I always say, my sincere thanks to all of you for being just the greatest supporters in the history of podcasts. I appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Until next time, hit 'em straight, my friends.